I used to think silence was a gift. After a life filled with too many arguments, too much noise, and too many goodbyes, I found comfort in the quiet hum of my old radiator and the whisper of wind through cracked window frames. My name's Carl. I live alone by choice. My house is the third to last on a muddy stretch of rural road that no GPS ever seems to recognize. The mailbox leans like it's tired, and the porch groans whenever I shift my weight. I like it that way, unchanged, untouched. It was one of those miserable nights, rain slicing sideways, wind howling like it had something personal to say. I'd just settled into my recliner, a cup of instant coffee cooling on the side table, when I heard it. A knock, not at the front door. Number. It came from the side, the porch door, just one. Then silence. I waited, thinking maybe it was the wind, but then came the second sound, not a knock this time, a low, trembling growl. Faint, too real. I grumbled, shoved myself up, and shuffled to the door. The porch light flickered once before deciding to work, casting a sickly yellow circle outside. And there it was, a dog, small, maybe knee-high, soaked to the bone, shivering, covered in muck. Its fur was patchy, like it had seen more fights than meals. It just stood there on the top step, looking up at me. Not barking, not moving, just staring. "Get," I snapped, slapping my palm against the glass. "Go on, shoo!" It didn't move, just blinked once. Slow. That's when something about it hit me. Not the fur or the stink, but the eyes. They weren't wild or afraid. They weren't pleading like strays usually were. No, they looked human. Not literally, but something in them. Like they knew me. I felt my jaw clench. I don't do dogs, never have, not anymore. "Go!" I barked louder, stepping out onto the porch. "You're not wanted here!" Still nothing. The rain pounded harder. The dog took one small step forward, just enough to place its paw on the welcome mat, and gave a soft, guttural whine. I snapped. I raised my boot and kicked. Not hard, but enough to send a clear message. My foot caught the edge of its chest. It yelped, slid backward down the steps, and landed in the mud. My heart thudded in my ears, not from guilt, but from something else. A chill I couldn't explain, but the dog didn't run, didn't cry, just stood in the rain, staring up at me with those damn eyes. For a second I thought I saw a flicker of disappointment, like I'd failed some test I didn't know I was taking. And then it turned and vanished, quietly, without a sound, into the woods at the edge of the yard. Gone like it had never been there. I stood there longer than I should have, the rain soaking into my flannel sleeves. My foot still tingled from the kick. Inside, the radiator hissed like it was scolding me. I muttered a curse and slammed the door. I didn't sleep well that night. The storm didn't help, but it wasn't the thunder that kept me up. It was the silence after. The way the wind seemed to hush. The way I kept thinking about those eyes. How they didn't blink when I raised my foot. How they looked like they knew something I didn't. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was just a stray, a sick mutt wandering through the woods. Nothing more, but I was wrong, dead wrong. I woke up to the sound of rain still tapping against the windows like a stubborn memory. The storm hadn't let up overnight. If anything, it had grown more aggressive. The gutters gurgled like they were choking on the weight of the water, and the yard outside was more mud than grass. I made coffee I didn't want, stared out the kitchen window, and told myself to forget about last night. Just a stray, I said. Just a mutt with weird eyes. But something didn't sit right. I don't know what made me step outside. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe I just didn't want to feel like I was being watched anymore. Because that's how it felt, like someone or something had been watching me ever since the knock. I tugged on my jacket, pulled my boots over my pajama pants, and stepped onto the porch. It was still wet, slick with rain and old paint peeling like dead skin. The wind had knocked over my rusted watering can, and leaves were plastered to the siding like someone had tried to decorate the house with decay. But none of that is what made me stop cold. It was the thing lying right where the dog had stood the night before. A collar. At first, I thought it was just junk. Maybe a raccoon dragged it from somewhere. But as I got closer, I saw the leather, dark brown, waterlogged, cracked with age. The metal tag was dull, but the letters were still clear. Benny, if found, return to Carl. My legs went stiff. My breath caught somewhere between my ribs and throat. I picked it up, and the leather squished in my hand, cold, heavy, real. The name! My name. Now I've lived in this house for 20 years. I know what animals I've owned. I know what pets have come and gone. But I've never had a dog now.
Named Benny, I don't even like dogs. That's the whole point. That's why I yelled at that mutt. Why I kicked it. I stared at that tag for a long time. Rain dripped from the brim of my hood, soaking into my collar. My fingers trembled, not from the cold, but from the weight of something I couldn't explain. Was this some kind of joke? Did one of the neighbors put this here? No one really talked to me, but maybe someone had heard the yelling last night. Maybe they wanted to make a point. But that didn't explain how old the collar was, or how the nameplate looked like it had been there for years. The metal wasn't just rusted, it was corroded, like it had been buried, forgotten, dug up. I turned it over. On the inside of the collar, scratched faintly into the leather, was another word. I had to hold it close, squint through the wet. Forever. Just that. One word. I stumbled back, dropped the collar like it burned. It landed with a sick thud on the porch. That's when it hit me. A sound not out loud, but in my head. A memory? A whisper? I don't know. But I heard it, clear as the wind around me. If found, return to Carl. I backed up and slammed the door behind me, locking it without thinking. And for the first time in years, I turned the deadbolt. The rest of the day passed in a fog. I tried to watch TV, couldn't focus, tried to nap, no use. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that collar, those letters, and those eyes from last night. Not angry, not scared, just watching, waiting. Night fell again. The rain kept going. I didn't turn off the porch light. I didn't want to. Something told me the dog wasn't done with me. And deep down, somewhere I didn't want to admit, I was starting to wonder if I had known a dog named Benny. And if so, what else had I forgotten? Sleep didn't come that night. Not truly. I drifted in and out of a restless daze, jerking awake at every creak, every gust of wind. I kept expecting to hear claws on the porch again, or worse, see those eyes through the window. I didn't. But that made it worse somehow. The silence felt heavier now, not peaceful, punishing. By morning, the rain had thinned to a miserable drizzle, but my thoughts were still storming. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the collar on the table like it might suddenly grow legs. I hadn't touched it since yesterday. I didn't want to, but I couldn't throw it out either. That name, my name, and his name, Benny. I kept telling myself it wasn't possible. I'd never had a dog by that name. But that kind of certainty was starting to crack at the edges. There was something. A tickle in the back of my skull. Like a page just out of reach in a book I once read and forgot. Eventually I gave in to the gnawing inside me. If there was anything that could explain this, I'd find it in the attic. That place hadn't been touched in years. It was where old things went to disappear, just like old memories. Maybe that was the point. I pulled down the creaking ladder and climbed into the dust-choked space. Cobwebs clung to my jacket and every floorboard complained under my boots. Old trunks, boxes, yellowing newspapers, junk. But as I rummaged through it, I saw something that made my breath catch. A small blue crate with stickers peeling off the sides, space rockets, cartoon bones, a faded paw print. I crouched down and opened it. Inside were toys, chewed plastic, tennis balls long since deflated, and a bright red leash still coiled neatly. My hands shook as I reached further in, pulling out a thick album wrapped in a cracked leather cover. I didn't recognize it, but my name was scribbled on the front in a child's messy scrawl, Carl's Book of Adventures. I sat cross-legged on the floor and opened it. The smell hit me first. Old paper, dust, something sweet and sour like dried leaves. And then the images. Me, a boy of maybe 7 or 8, smiling, laughing, holding a small dog in my arms, a muddy little mutt with shaggy fur and floppy ears. His tongue was hanging out and his tail was a blur in every photo. On his neck, a collar, the same one. The tag gleamed in one of the shots, just clear enough to read, Benny. And below the photo in a child's handwriting, the words, me and Benny. Best friends forever. I froze. My chest felt like it was caving in. I flipped page after page, birthday parties, backyards, sticks thrown across creeks, me and Benny, again and again. Always with that same joy on my face, a joy I didn't recognize in myself anymore, a joy I'd long buried under bitterness, silence, and routine. But then the photos stopped, abruptly. The last one showed me sitting alone on the porch, no smile, arms wrapped around my knees. No Benny, no caption. The rest of the album was blank. And just like that, the memories came. Not all at once. Not like a movie. More like fragments, flashes of sound and feeling, a bark echoing through the woods, laughter, a storm, a scream. My hand gripped the album tighter. Why had I forgotten all this?
Why had it taken a muddy dog on the porch to pull it back? I stood up and looked around the attic like I might find more pieces of myself buried in the insulation. But what I felt wasn't clarity. It was dread. Like this was only the beginning of something I'd spent my whole life trying not to remember. I closed the album and took it downstairs, setting it gently beside the collar on the table. 2 ghosts, one made of leather and metal, the other of paper and ink. They belonged to me, somehow, whether I wanted them or not. That night, I didn't bother locking the door. Part of me hoped the dog would come back. Part of me was terrified he would. I avoided that side of the hallway for years. It wasn't a conscious thing. I didn't wake up one morning and say, I'll never open that door again. It just sort of happened. Like dust collecting in corners. You ignore it long enough, it becomes part of the scenery. But after the photo album, after Benny's name, his face, the way my young self looked so damn happy holding him, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The memories were clawing their way up through the cracks, and all roads led to that door. Tommy's door. It still had the faded sticker letters we'd put up as kids. Tommy's room, keep out, half peeled and curling at the edges. The doorknob felt cold in my hand, and when I twisted it, it didn't budge, locked. Of course it was. I stood there for a long moment, forehead against the frame, listening to the silence on the other side. Something inside me whispered that once I opened that room, nothing would ever be the same again. I went to the kitchen, rummaged through drawers until I found the old ring of spare keys. The third one down slid in smooth, like it had been waiting. The door creaked open with the kind of groan that seemed to echo deeper than the hallway itself. The air inside was still, thicker, like it hadn't been disturbed in decades. Dust coated every surface, dancing in the shaft of morning light that cut through a gap in the curtains. The smell was faint but familiar. Old wood, fabric rot, something sweet and sour like forgotten candy. I stepped inside, slowly. Everything was exactly as it had been the last time I saw it. The twin bed with its faded blue sheets, posters of dinosaurs and rockets on the walls, edges curled with time. A toy box in the corner. A little bookshelf with titles like Choose Your Own Adventure and Where the Red Fern Grows. And then I saw it. The dog bowl, still sitting by the closet. Cracked, dry, with a faded name scrawled in marker. Benny. Beside it, a torn leash, chewed through. or maybe ripped. I don't know how long I stood there just taking it all in. Part of me wanted to walk out, pretend I hadn't seen any of it. But something tugged at me, something small and persistent. There was a journal on the desk, spiral-bound, worn at the edges, the kind kids use for school. I picked it up carefully, brushing off the dust. Tommy's handwriting was messy, large and spaced out, the kind of scribble only little kids can make look important. I started reading. Benny barked again last night, I told Carl, but he said it was just raccoons. Benny's not dumb. He knows. He only barks when it's there. I flipped the page. It's back again, the thing in the woods. Benny wouldn't stop growling. Carl yelled at him to shut up. I told him not to. Benny's scared. I can feel it too. Another page. Carl locked Benny outside. Said he needed to learn to behave. I cried. He didn't care. I heard Benny scratching. I wanted to let him in. Carl wouldn't let me. My hands trembled. Then the final page. Just one sentence. Benny's missing. Carl said he ran away, but I think Carl did something. My stomach dropped. My mouth went dry. I stared at that sentence until the letters blurred. Did I do something? Did I really do something? I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember. But the signs were everywhere now. Benny was real. Tommy had written about him. He had feared something out there. Something in the woods. Something that made Benny bark. And I'd silenced him. I closed the journal and sat on the edge of the bed. It creaked under my weight, like it remembered me. Like the whole room had just been waiting, frozen in time, for me to come back and face it. The photo album, the collar, now this. Something happened, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to find out what, but I didn't think I had a choice anymore. The journal sat open on my kitchen table next to the collar and the photo album. 3 ghosts in ink and leather and faded smiles. I hadn't touched them since I brought them down, but they might as well have been whispering. I felt them every time I passed by, felt the weight of what I didn't want to face, the feeling that something was waiting. And that night, I stopped pretending. It was around midnight when it happened. I'd left the porch light on again, like some stubborn part of me was still hoping the stray might come back. Or maybe I just wanted proof. Something I could point to and say, there, I'm not losing my mind. I'd just turned off the TV and was making my slow way toward the bedroom when the sound came. A howl, long, low, and not quite right. It wasn't a coyote, not a dog, not even something in pain. It was something else, something old. It clawed down my spine like cold fingernails. I crept to the window and pulled the curtain back, just a sliver. He was there, soaked, thin, standing at the edge of the yard where the light from the porch faded into black. The same dog, the same eyes, but now they glowed. Not in a cartoonish way, just faint. A dim amber like dying embers. He wasn't barking, he wasn't growling, he was just staring. And then he tilted his head, just a little, like he was asking if I remembered yet. I slammed the curtain shut, heart pounding. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't, because a few minutes later I heard the scratching. Soft at first, then longer, claws against wood, walls, floorboards, not in any one place but everywhere, like he was circling the house, inside the walls, the kind of sound that gets into your teeth and sets your nerves on fire. I grabbed the baseball bat from behind the door. Get out of my head, I muttered. You're not real, you're not real. But then came the voice. Software. Childlike, from the hallway behind me. Carl! I turned. No one was there. Just the long empty stretch toward the bedrooms. Then again, a whisper, closer this time. Carl, why'd you lie? I gripped the bat tighter, shaking now. Every light in the house flickered once. Then again. The scratching moved to the floor beneath me. Then the ceiling. Then stopped altogether. I didn't sleep. I didn't sit. I just stood in the middle of the room, shaking, sweating, listening. When the sun finally started bleeding in through the windows, I went to the front door and opened it slowly. The porch was soaked again. The rain had returned sometime in the early morning, but what made my stomach drop wasn't the water. It was the muddy paw prints leading across the floorboards into the house and stopping right in front of the kitchen table where the collar, the photo album, and Tommy's journal still sat. 3 ghosts, now 4. I stood there for a long time. Then I whispered something out loud I hadn't dared say in decades. "Tommy, I'm sorry." The lights flickered one last time, and somewhere, far off, I thought I heard the faintest bark. Not angry, not hurt, just waiting. The storm rolled in again the next evening, a grim echo of that first night, the one where the dog came. Only now I knew his name, Benny, and the whispers I'd been trying to outrun my whole life had found a voice. Tommy's voice. I didn't bother turning on the TV, didn't bother pretending I could distract myself anymore. My world had shrunk to the creaking floors of this house, the shadows behind the curtains, and the truths that had finally clawed their way to the surface. I stood by the back door for a long time, watching the wind thrash the trees. The shed sat out there at the edge of the yard, half swallowed by weeds, its roof sagging like a broken spine. I hadn't gone near it in years. Maybe because I knew, deep down, that something was buried behind it, something more than just bones. The muddy paw prints had returned that morning, but this time they didn't stop at the porch. They trailed all the way around the house, toward the shed. By nightfall, I couldn't take the weight anymore. I grabbed a flashlight, my boots, and an old shovel from the garage. The rain stung my face like needles. The mud sucked at my steps as I crossed the yard, heart pounding with every footfall. The shed loomed ahead, its wood warped and peeling. As I reached it, I paused. Something inside me screamed to turn back. I didn't. I circled to the back. The flashlight flickered, once, twice, before staying on. The beam landed on a patch of dirt that looked wrong, uneven, like something had shifted there. I planted the shovel in the ground. The earth gave too easily. Each scoop came faster than the last, the metal blade slicing through mud, roots, and something else, something that made a dull clink. And then the smell hit. Not fresh death, something older, dry, like a forgotten cellar opened after decades. I dropped to my knees and dug with my hands now, pulling away chunks of earth until something surfaced. Bones, small, curved, fragile, animal bones, and then not. A tiny sneaker, torn, mottled with soil, still faintly red. I stopped breathing. I pulled it free and stared. Tommy's shoe. I remembered that shoe. I remembered the day Mom bought them for him, how proud he was, how he kept them spotless, how furious I got when he stepped on my comic book with them. And then the rest came. The truth. It had been storming just like this. Benny wouldn't stop barking. He kept scratching at the door, whining, growling. I was furious. I didn't understand. I just wanted silence. I locked him outside. I screamed at him. I told him to shut up. Tommy begged me not to. He said Benny was trying to warn us, said there was something in the woods. I didn't care. I pushed him away. I left Benny out in the cold, and when the hillside behind the shed gave out, Tommy ran after him. He always did love that dog more than anything. The mudslide buried them both. And I froze. I didn't scream. I didn't tell anyone. I said they ran away, that they just vanished. I let the rain wash it away. I buried the truth before anyone could dig it up. And I forgot. Or tried to. But you can't bury the past. Not really. Not when it scratches at your door in the dead of night. Not when it howls. I sat there in the rain, holding the little shoe in one hand and the collar in the other, Benny's collar. The wind howled through the trees like a voice I finally understood. They were never trying to scare me. They were trying to be found, trying to come home. I don't remember walking back to the house. I don't remember the weight of the mud on my boots, or how many times I stumbled. I don't remember dropping the shovel, or the flashlight, or how long I sat in the rain before the sky started to clear. What I remember is collapsing. My knees gave out somewhere between the shed and the porch, and I sank to the ground, like the truth had hollowed me out. I stayed there, hunched in the mud, the child's sneaker clutched to my chest like a lifeline. The rain finally stopped, but the clouds lingered, thick and low. The wind had gone quiet, like the earth itself was holding its breath. And that's when I felt it. A warmth. Not from the air, not from the sky, but from the presence. I opened my eyes slowly, half expecting to see nothing, to be alone again, to have dreamed it all. But he was there. Benny, soaked, shaking, his fur still matted with rain and time. But his eyes, those eyes hadn't changed, still too deep, too human, still filled with something I didn't deserve. He stood at the bottom of the porch steps, staring at me, not angry, not vengeful, just waiting. My lips moved before I could stop them. "I'm sorry," I whispered. He didn't move, just blinked once, slow. "I didn't know," I said, voice cracking. "Or maybe I did, maybe I just didn't want to." I pushed myself to my knees, every joint screaming. "I was scared. I was cruel. I locked you out. And when you didn't come back, I made myself forget. I told everyone you ran away. I told myself that too. And Tommy..." My throat tightened. "I let him go after you. I didn't stop him. And when the mud came down, I just stood there. I was a coward. And then I buried everything. You, him, the truth. All of it." The tears came hard now, and I didn't try to stop them. "I've lived in this house for decades, Benny. Alone, bitter, thinking the world wronged me. But it was me. I broke something, and I never fixed it." Benny took one small step forward, onto the porch. The wood didn't creak, the world didn't shake. But something inside me shifted. He stared at me one last time. Those deep, knowing eyes, and then, slowly, he turned. He walked toward the woods, not running, not limping, just moving forward like he'd been waiting for this moment all along. I didn't hesitate. I stood and followed. My legs were weak. My clothes clung to me. My hands trembled, but I followed, past the shed, past the trees, into the mist. And as we disappeared into that soft grey fog, I swear I heard another set of footsteps join us, smaller, lighter, a child's, Tommy. The next morning, the sun rose quiet and clean. The neighbours said they hadn't seen me since the day before. They checked the house, found the door ajar, the lights flickering. On the porch, sitting neatly in the centre of the welcome mat, was a small, cracked collar. Benny, if found, returned to Carl. No one ever saw Carl again, but some nights, when the rain rolls in heavy and the woods go still, a low howl carries on the wind, not mournful, not threatening, just waiting.